For most bands, replacing a drummer is difficult. For Rush, it was almost unthinkable. When legendary drummer and lyricist Neil Peart passed away in 2020, many fans believed the story of Rush had ended forever. The connection between Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and Peart wasn't just musical, it was the foundation of the band's identity. That's why, when Rush announced their 50-something tour and revealed that German drummer Anika Nilles would be sitting behind the kit, the reaction was immediate. Some fans were excited, others were skeptical, and many were asking the same question. How could anyone possibly step into Neil Peart's place? What made the situation even riskier was that Nilles wasn't the obvious celebrity choice. Rush could have picked one of several world-famous rock drummers. Instead, they chose a musician known mainly in drumming circles, despite her acclaimed work, including touring with Jeff Beck. Geddy Lee later explained that Nilles first came to his attention through his longtime bass tech, who had worked with Jeff Beck and repeatedly praised her talent. Miederes. Consequence +1. But there was another detail that shocked longtime Rush fans. According to Lee and Lifeson, Nilles wasn't actually a lifelong Rush superfan. She knew Neil Peart's reputation, of course, but she hadn't spent decades obsessing over every Rush album the way many fans had. Mieder. Guitar World +1. For some fans, that sounded like a red flag. For others, it was exactly what made the choice interesting. Because instead of trying to find a Neil Peart clone, Rush appeared to be doing something much more dangerous. They were looking for a musician with her own voice. And that decision would soon put Anika Nilles under a microscope unlike anything she had ever experienced. Every fill, every transition. Once Anika Nilles accepted the offer, the reality of the challenge began to sink in. This wasn't just another tour. This was Rush. And that meant every song came with decades of history attached to it. Neil Peart wasn't simply a drummer who kept time. He was widely regarded as one of the greatest drummers in rock history. His performances on songs like Tom Sawyer, YYZ, Subdivisions, and Limelight became study material for generations of drummers. Many musicians can learn the notes. Very few can capture the spirit behind them. Nilles quickly realized that trying to imitate Peart perfectly would be a mistake. In interviews, both Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson explained that they weren't looking for someone to become a copy of Neil. They wanted someone who could honor the music while still bringing authenticity to the performance. That philosophy became a crucial part of Neil's approach. But there was one major problem. Some of Rush's most beloved songs contain incredibly complex rhythmic ideas. Peart often played subdivisions, accents, and orchestrations that sound simple to casual listeners but are extremely difficult to execute consistently at a professional level. Nilles later revealed that certain Rush parts forced her to completely rethink patterns she had learned differently throughout her career. Imagine being a world-class drummer and suddenly discovering that some of the most famous drum parts ever recorded require you to rebuild habits you've used for years. That's exactly what happened. While fans were debating online whether she was the right choice, Nilles was spending countless hours breaking down songs piece by piece. Not because she lacked the skill, because she respected the music enough to know that getting close wasn't good enough. Every detail mattered. Every note mattered. And the closer she got to performing these songs, the more she understood the enormous responsibility she had accepted. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. As rehearsals continued, Nilles made a decision that many replacement musicians would never dare make. Instead of hiding behind a perfect imitation of Neil Peart, she began embracing small elements of her own musical personality. To some fans, that would sound like confidence. To others, it would sound like sacrilege. And when word of that approach started spreading, the debate among Rush fans intensified. The real test didn't happen in rehearsals. It didn't happen during sound checks, and it certainly didn't happen in online discussions. The real test came when Anika Nilles stepped onto the stage in front of thousands of Rush fans who knew every note of the band's catalog. This was the audience Neil Peart had spent decades performing for. Many of them had seen Rush multiple times. Some had followed the band since the 1970s. And almost all of them had strong opinions about what Rush should sound like. As the first songs began, fans naturally focused on the drums. Every fill was being compared to the original recordings. Every transition was being measured against memories that had been built over decades. For any drummer, that level of scrutiny would be intimidating. But something unexpected started happening. The audience wasn't hearing someone struggle to imitate Neil Peart. They were hearing a musician who clearly understood why those parts mattered. Nilles delivered the essential elements that fans expected, but she also played with confidence and conviction. Instead of sounding nervous or restrained, she sounded like a performer who had earned her place on the stage. That balance turned out to be crucial. Because Rush fans weren't just evaluating technical accuracy, they were evaluating respect. Did she understand the legacy? Did she appreciate the responsibility? Did she genuinely care about the music? With every performance, more fans began answering those questions with a yes. Even some of the skeptics started changing their minds, and perhaps the biggest reason was simple. Nilles never acted as if she was replacing Neil Peart. She treated the role as a tribute to the music while remaining honest about who she was as a drummer. That distinction may seem small, but it made all the difference. The more fans watched her perform, the more they realized that she wasn't trying to erase Peart's influence. She was helping keep the music alive. And that realization would lead to one of the most important turning points of the entire tour. By this point, something remarkable had happened. The conversation around Anika Nilles was changing. Early on, many fans had focused on what she wasn't. She wasn't Neil Peart. She didn't grow up as a famous Rush tribute drummer. She wasn't chosen because she looked like the safest possible option. But after seeing her performances and hearing the care she brought to the music, more fans started focusing on what she actually was: a world-class musician who respected the legacy enough to be herself. And that's where the risky move finally paid off. The easiest path would have been to imitate every gesture, every fill, and every nuance exactly as Neil Peart played them. Many fans initially expected that. Some even demanded it. But Nilles understood something important. No matter how hard she tried, she could never become Neil Peart. Nobody could. Trying to create a perfect copy would only remind audiences of what was missing. Instead, she chose a more difficult approach. She learned the parts thoroughly, respected the structure of the songs, and preserved the musical moments that Rush fans cherished. But when the music allowed room for expression, she performed with her own feel, timing, and personality. That decision carried real risk. One wrong move could have triggered criticism from fans who believed every note should remain untouched. Yet the opposite happened. Many listeners began appreciating the honesty of her approach. They recognized that she wasn't treating Rush's music like a museum exhibit frozen in time. She was treating it like living music, music that deserved both respect and energy. Even more importantly, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson appeared fully supportive of that philosophy. Their goal had never been to find a clone. Their goal was to find the right musician. And the more fans saw the chemistry developing on stage, the more that choice made sense. What started as skepticism was increasingly turning into admiration. But the greatest sign of acceptance wasn't applause. It wasn't positive reviews. It wasn't social media praise. It was something much harder to earn. Fans began defending her. People who had once questioned the decision were now explaining why it worked. In the end, the story of Anika Nilles and Rush was never really about drums. It was about trust. When Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson chose Nilles, they weren't just selecting a musician. They were asking fans to trust a decision involving one of the most sacred parts of Rush's legacy. That was always going to be difficult. Neil Peart's impact on the band is impossible to overstate. His drumming, songwriting, and presence helped define Rush for more than 4 decades. For many fans, the idea of anyone else sitting behind that drum kit felt uncomfortable from the very beginning. But that's exactly why Nilles earned so much respect. She never tried to claim she was the next Neil Peart. She never presented herself as a replacement for a legend. Instead, she approached the challenge with humility, preparation, and a genuine appreciation for the music. And perhaps most importantly, she took the risk of being herself. That may sound simple, but in the world of Rush, it was anything but. The safest choice would have been to disappear into a perfect imitation. The safer public relations move would have been to avoid any hint of individuality. Yet Nilles understood that authenticity mattered. Rush had always been a band built on musicians pushing boundaries, developing their own voices, and refusing to follow the easiest path. In many ways, bringing her own identity to the music was completely consistent with that tradition. Over time, fans began recognizing this. They saw the countless hours of preparation. They saw the respect she showed toward Neil Peart's work. They saw the chemistry she developed with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. And they saw a musician who understood that honoring a legacy doesn't mean freezing it in place. It means carrying it forward with care. That's why the risky move worked. Not because every fan agreed on every performance, not because comparisons to Neil Peart suddenly disappeared, but because Anika Nilles proved that respect isn't earned through imitation alone. It's earned through commitment. It's earned through honesty. And it's earned through the courage to step into an impossible situation and give everything you have. For many Rush fans, that became the defining lesson of her journey. The moment she stopped trying to be the next Neil Peart and simply became the best version of Anika Nilles, she earned something that once seemed almost impossible: their respect. And for a musician stepping into one of the most challenging roles in rock history, that may be the greatest achievement